to punch somebody out.
Exactly, because that's what they're most familiar with.
How is there an overall word that you could use to describe these?
Yes, that's a good question. Now, self-defense or personal protection is different. When it comes to self-defense or personal protection, we are regulated by the law, so to speak. But a lot less rules apply compared to sports martial arts. We're not there to score. We're
Hmm.
there to uh,
Welcome, everybody. I'm Donna from Worldwide Academy Training Services, and I am here today again with our lead instructor, Thurston Jr. And we have a topic that we thought was important to discuss with you today. We offer a class which we entitle Personal Protection. And I've had some discussions with people in the past about what we actually do. There are some preconceived ideas about what personal protection is. And so we felt like we needed to define what our program actually is compared to some other programs that are out there because of that fact that people come with a preconceived idea of what it is. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we do that, real quick, if you wouldn't mind, hit the thumbs up, please. Hit that like button, comment. Feel free to comment, to share, and please subscribe. We are very close to being able to go live, and we want to do that because we want to include you all in our conversation. So go do that right away, please. Subscribe, share, get this information out to other people. All right, so Thurston, you
good
had
morning.
sent me a brief summary of the different kinds of the different categories of is there an overall word that you could use to describe these?
Yes, that's a good question. The general label is martial arts. Now, we distinguish martial arts as a general term from the traditional martial arts. There are traditional martial arts styles, but let's go back to the definition of martial arts. Martial arts is the arts or the practice of war or combat. And all of these systems, for the most part anyway, have developed as a result of warfare and the study of warfare and how best to apply the skills and techniques related to it. And then from there, we break it down to many different categories and subcategories.
Okay. So we're definitely not talking about, well, or are we, warfare with what we do. Um, let's
Well,
let's
no,
just I'm gonna just basically turn it over to you. I know you have an idea of how you might want to present this to people. Do you want to talk about what we do first or go through each one?
well, let's talk about the categories because like you said, many people have brought up questions, and I I get these questions all the time as to what we actually do or what I actually do, what people are looking for, and there is like with anything, there's a lot of confusion. Uh, the point is that we need to know, first of all, if we're looking for a martial arts system, we need to understand what our mission is or what our purpose is for getting it. So let's talk about the different categories first of all. Okay. Basically, the categories break down to combat and self-defense, and then there's sport and competition. Then there's traditional or cultural martial arts styles, and and then there, and in those categories they break down even further. For instance, there are arts designed with techniques that just do striking, like karate and Muay Thai and Taekwondo. Those are common names that most people are familiar with, where there's kicking, there's striking with the hands and what have you, different parts of the body. And then there's grappling systems like the wrestling, judo, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which seems to be a hot commodity these days.
Hmm.
And then it's broken down even from there to hybrid systems where they do striking and grappling. For
Okay.
instance, like Krav Maga and mixed martial arts, Jeet Kune Do and styles like that. Again, common forms that people are familiar with.
So I think that, and I'm gonna cut you off,
But
but I think when most people think about a uh, a protection class, don't you think that they think that it involves the striking? Everybody wants to kick and hit and beat their beat
well,
their enemy.
well,
That's
well, yeah,
basically what, like, teach me how to punch somebody out.
exactly, because that's what they're most familiar with. That's the aspect of martial arts they're familiar with. That's the thing that's the aspect of it that has been marketed for eons, so to speak. And it's understandable. That's where people get it from. You see it on the movies, books, uh, media. I mean, it's all over the place, and it has been. I remember when I was a kid and I got involved in martial arts. My first experience was with judo, and it was because I saw a Bruce Lee movie, and that was a big thing back in the 70s. So,
I had
you know,
judo in college for half of a semester. I don't remember anything. I remember throwing somebody over, but jujitsu. But yeah, and I think that's what we think we have to do,
yes,
and this is what I think. I mean, I don't know. I haven't been involved in the other martial arts, but I think we think that we have to do these things, but yet there are things that we can do before we even get to the striking and that whole involvement of having to physically really get involved with an enemy or
and, absolutely, and that's how it's broken down even further from there. And there's one more category that that didn't mention with the striking and the grappling is also in the hybrid systems. There's also weapon-based systems that primarily just deal with weapons. Our modern day gunfighters, for instance, or Filipino martial arts, um, the Kali stick fighting, what have you, even though they implement, and that's another thing too, even though I mentioned these different categories, many of these styles have a little bit of everything in them. So even a grappler that may be specializing in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu doesn't mean that they won't strike, but that's not their primary focus,
Mhm.
so to speak. And the same thing with Filipino martial arts. Filipino martial arts is consistently designed, or depending upon these styles, I think they still are designed to use hands, to use sticks, and to use blades. And they integrate all those systems together so that it creates a seamless system, so to speak. At least that's the aim.
So do you think it comes down to focus really for each one? Is a
Yes,
particular
exactly.
focus then? Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's what it boils down to.
Yeah.
Like for instance, the combat sports martial arts that we see on TV, MMA, boxing, kickboxing, even wrestling. I mean, these were all combative skills or combat skills that that evolved into sports and competition. One of the things that the focus is that they develop the conditioning, the strategy, and the skill refinement to be able to compete against one another in a very regulated environment,
Okay.
and that's the focus. Okay.
Okay.
Um,
So it's more of a sport
More
or an
competition where
art,
you
you know.
outscore one another. Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Now, Self-defense or personal protection is different in the sense that there, even though there is regulations, none of these arts are taught, or at least not supposed to be taught, as if there's no rules, because you still have laws, even in combat. We'll get to that later. There's still what's called the Geneva Convention that give you rules of war, even though we all have criminals in all aspects. But when it comes to self-defense and personal protection, we are regulated by the law, so to speak. But a lot less rules apply compared to sports martial arts. We're not there to score. We're
Mm.
there to focus on, first of all, prevention, preventing from getting to a situation where it becomes physical, you get hurt, or somebody else gets hurt. We focus on, let me rephrase this. Self-defense and personal protection is supposed to train you to have the skills of situational awareness to avoid being in conflict. It's supposed to train you to de-escalate so that you don't get engulfed in a verbal or physical confrontation. It's supposed to train you to create or recognize opportunities to escape to avoid conflict. And it's supposed to train you that if you get ambushed, that you can counter ambush to get yourself
And
out of the jam.
that's
So
the
that's what
thing.
it's supposed to do.
Yeah, and I think that's the part that people miss. And
And
so they, again, they have those preconceived ideas. I'm going to go in, I'm going to learn how to protect myself by fighting, and not even really thinking about what builds up to that,
no, it's done.
you know?
And basically, many people get into legal problems because of it.
Hmm.
Um, it is, uh, and that's the part that many times it's missing. I mean, it's just eliminated or never even mentioned in many circles when it comes to self-defense or personal protection. You just can't hit somebody just because.
Yeah,
We
and
have it has to be your um, self-defense is regulated by laws, and every state has their own guidelines. They may be generally the same, but you have to know the nuances that represent your state or country for that matter.
hmm,
And if you don't, you can find yourself being right, but still be wrong and have to pay the penalty for it. And that's what you want to try to avoid.
well, those those types of things don't really sell. It's
No,
not
they
as
don't.
glamorous, or I don't know, maybe it's the wrong word, but
No,
it's just does not as appealing or exciting for people to sit
no.
and go in a class that teaches you how to be more situation aware.
Yes.
I
I
mean,
think
that's just, yeah,
I think the word is tactical. It's not tactical.
tactical.
It's not tactical to talk about legal issues. It's not tactical to talk about situational awareness. It's not all that stuff that we're talking about is very cognitive, is very intuitive based. It's not kinetically based, and that's what lights people's fire, so to speak.
Mhm.
And those are the things that are more important than the physical part. I mean, I did a study a little while ago, just out of curiosity. It was my spirit to just look at this thing that we call um, martial arts, and to find out what drives other programs. And so I looked at, for some reason, it came to my mind. Wonder what special forces, what they do with their combatives, and that's another form of martial art, military combatives, which is entirely again different focus.
Mhm.
I mean, people think that they're all focused on killing folks. No, they can't just kill everybody. Their focus is on non-lethal and lethal means of dealing with situations, but it also has to do with how what is the most efficient way to do it.
Mm.
That's the focus. What's the most efficient way to do it? And also another focus is integrating it, like Filipino martial arts, they integrate using sticks and blades. Same thing with military combatives.
Mhm.
Implement their hand-to-hand skills with their weapon skills. How do I? It has to be seamless. I can't stop and think when to pull my gun and
Right.
my weapon and so on and so forth. So there's an integration there, but I want to look at special forces and how much time they spend on the martial skills versus the what you might call the soft skills, um, the intuitive skills, situational awareness, the cognitive skills. And you know what it boiled down to is that 70 to 80% of the time, training, resources, and energy was devoted to those soft skills versus
Mm.
maybe 10 and 20%, or I'm sorry, 20 and 30% for the kinetic skills, the shooting, the hitting, the punching, the grappling, and it all makes sense.
Yeah.
But why in the civilian world do we flip it and we have very little interest in those skills that they spend that much time and money and resources in? Uh, there's
Mm.
there's something wrong with that, and
Mm.
we have to be mindful how easily not knowing what to do in certain situations can not only get us hurt or somebody else and ourselves hurt or killed, but get us in legal problems that we can easily avoid if we just learn the skills or even just know the law and practice what we know.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people are not aware of that they just think, well, I'm defending myself, so I'll be fine, you know?
Exactly.
And they wouldn't even think that there would be some kind of consequence legally.
Yeah. They say, oh, they hit me, I killed them.
Mm.
Or here's one that it really grinds my gears when I hear this. People will go out and get a firearm, and because they have a firearm, you can't tell them that they can't deal with every situation. They're protected now
Yeah.
because I have a firearm, and if somebody bothers me, I can shoot them. Well, it's not that simple. And even if they say it to themselves out loud, I think it'll click something. I hope it does to say, wait a minute, maybe it isn't that simple
Mm.
because it's not. You can't shoot somebody for punching you. You just can't. You
Yeah.
can't shoot somebody for threatening to hurt you or your family members.
I see so many people on social media just, when something happens in an area and the comments that people make, show up at my house and you'll get
Yeah,
this and
yeah,
that. And I'm like,
yeah, yeah. You every law, every state has their own laws, but
mm,
even if somebody broke into your house, you better be able to prove or to justify why you took their life. You purposely took their life in the sense that you have to be able to prove to a reasonable group of people, reasonable group of your peers, that your life was either uh, uh, you had an immediate threat of your life or serious bodily harm to you yourself or someone else. Other than that, you're gonna have a problem.
mm,
You're gonna have a problem. So yes, people need to know the difference. And I use the word, and we use the word often when we're talking about martial arts, the word fight. And I'm trying to develop a vernacular where I don't use that word a lot, because when the law hears the word fight, they hear a mutual exchange, a mutual agreement that we're going to get it on. And whenever you give the law that impression that you've come into an agreement with this person that you're going to fight them, then you're both are going to be charged.
Mm.
You're no longer a victim. You're a willing participant in activities that are illegal.
Yeah. Oh,
I try not to use the word fight, but it's hard uh, uh, to explain to people what you're talking about if you don't. But
would a better word be defend?
yes, but it can't be used in every
Yeah, true.
in every
It's
situation.
true.
So I try to do that, because when you use the word fight to some people use it as like a generic term, and it is not. The law doesn't look at it as a generic term, so we can't look at it as a generic term.
That's good to know. That's good to know. So, we talked about, excuse me, we talked about the martial arts, the combat, right? You talked about that, this self-defense, personal protection. We're going to talk more about that. And I'm looking at my notes here. Defensive tactics, which you mentioned that with law
Well,
enforcement.
yes, with law enforcement, it's again, it's a bit different. They're again, they're more regulated than us civilians in terms of self-defense. They have to have a better balance of protecting themselves, protecting other people,
Mm.
and also making arrests. So their focus is more on control and restraint versus kicking and punching and what have you, and also dealing with weapons, not only protecting themselves from weapons and using weapons, but also retaining their weapons so that their weapons aren't taken from them and used against them, which happens quite often. A perpetrator ends up being armed many times because they overpowered the officer and used their weapon against them. So
I
that
just
is
had
the
this
focus.
question come up in my mind. Which one of these, or is it even relevant? I know it is for some of these. Which one requires that you would have more emotional regulation?
All of them. every single
Everyone?
one of them. Even
Okay.
when people think that from military combatives, for instance, that um, that there's a switch that's flipped, and you can kill everybody and what. No, you cannot.
Mm.
There are many times in armed conflicts where there are civilians involved. There are many times in situations where enemy combatants surrender. You can't kill them. You can't, no, I'm sorry, you can, but there are consequences
Right,
as a result of that.
right.
Okay. So you always have to regulate emotions. Even in traditional martial arts, where the focus is again on not on any of these things. Most traditional martial arts is designed for many are designed for personal development, mental development,
Mm.
even spiritual to a certain to some art forms where they focus on that. So there's always, you can never separate the mental and the emotional from the physical.
Mm.
They always have to be kept under control.
Yeah.
And so
And
they apply to all of them.
just to remind people too that in the past, and it's on our playlist on our YouTube channel, that we did we did two parts about de-escalation, whether to, I forget the name of, to de-escalate or to fight, when to know. So we have that up on our channel with people that maybe want to take a look at that and
Oh,
go into the
definitely.
de-escalation a little bit more. But
Yes, yes.
okay, so
Um,
yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, to de-escalate uh, uh, conflicts between, ourselves, somebody,
Hmm.
somebody's being aggressive toward us, or even being a peacemaker between other individuals that are involved in conflict. We need to know those skills. Uh, so when it comes to emotions and just the mental part, it makes up a great deal of how we accomplish whatever art form or system you use. It will always make up a great deal of accomplishing whatever you're trying to accomplish for taking that art form. I mean, what's the outcome we're looking for? Is it fitness? Is it competition? Is it self-defense? Is it control and restraint for police officers and security personnel? Or is it um, dealing with military conflict scenarios? All of those require, it's not even optional. You have to be able to think through things. You have to be able to put a stamp on or restrain your emotions, because these are high stress situations that we are getting involved in. And it cannot ever be taken lightly. And that's another aspect of becoming proficient in these different systems, is because they really need to be pressure tested, because you need to be able to inoculate inoculate or train to inoculate ourselves to not allow our emotions to get away with us. Yeah, there's certain legal situations where the law says you can definitely use force, but you better know how much to use.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you use more than that, then we're going to charge you and put you in jail.
Mm-hmm.
And that means controlling your emotions. And it can be very difficult. It's not can be, it is very difficult.
Yeah. And there's a reason for doing everything we do. There's a
Yes.
purpose behind everything we do, a reason why we do what we do, is what I'm trying to say, I guess. So let's talk about personal protection and what we do, what you do in in your classes. Um, the the focus, the emphasis, whatever you want to share about that.
Okay. Yeah, our focus is again prevention. We first and foremost, the uh, best protection is to avoid harm, period. And the second emphasis is on detecting problems before they become a problem, detecting potential problems before they become a problem. So that's another area. And if it becomes a problem, being able to de-escalate it before it gets out of control.
Mm,
And if it gets out of control, be able to apply the skills that are necessary to remove yourself from that situation. And if you're doing and to do it in the most efficient way possible and legal.
mhm,
Okay. So basically, what we do is our focus has a little bit of all of those systems that we just mentioned in them. Um, Even though we don't, I'm in a process of developing a uh, what I call a conditioning club, where we can get together as a club and train on a consistent basis and condition ourselves for personal protection. I'm going to be calling it Philasso Sovereign Defense, and that'll take care of the conditioning part, but condition is skills as opposed to the uh, what we call like when we do the classes and workshops for individuals that aren't conditioned, but they need the skills to be able to immediately apply. Again, focus on efficiency.
Right.
Uh, then, we're not going to have the time to condition them to be
Right.
able to run faster, hit
Right.
harder, jump farther, so on and so forth. So they need the skills they can pull out of the box and apply quickly.
Mm.
Okay. And then there's the aspect of control and restraint. Every situation is not going to warrant or look good where we're punching somebody in the face.
Hmm.
Okay. Sometimes a push may be proficient. Sometimes a situation might be a grappling hold or a wrist lock may resolve the issue. So we need to have some of those skills too.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, there are some situations where, God forbid, where you might have to use a higher level of force that might end up killing someone. Um, Last resort. But the bottom line is if somebody's trying to kill you and you have no means of escape, or, and I think it's worst scenario, somebody's trying to kill somebody that I'm trying to protect, and that is my only recourse. First of all, let me just say this. We don't focus on, even in those severe or extreme situations, we don't focus on killing people. We focus on stopping people.
Mm.
If stopping them results in them stopping and not killing them, praise God, hallelujah. We've accomplished our goal and moved on.
Hmm.
But if it results in a person's death, that's not our goal. It doesn't have to be. But our goal is to stop the person from doing what they're doing because we've used, exhausted every other means of doing it, and this is our last resort,
Hmm.
and move on from there. But be able to also legally justify what we do, and we spend a lot of time on the legal aspects of what we do because it really is a shame to spend time and money on developing a skill set only to find yourself in jail
For sure.
or dealing with a guilty conscience of hurting somebody, disabling somebody, and you didn't really have to.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. Not only the legal aspects, but the emotional trauma that you go through, or you would go through, even if it was justified,
Abs-
it's another
ab-
life. And so
Absolutely.
that's pretty rough. And I've been to of course, I've been to the workshops, and I know that you take it in the way that you've done in the past anyway. You've taken the time to talk about these things and to give people plenty of opportunity to practice become the situational awareness part to, and you can, and people can come with a certain, you think you're aware. Okay, I look around when I'm going to my car or whatever, but there's always other things that you throw at us, in a situation, which is great, the skills practice, that make you think further. And, as you're talking, and I'm thinking, wow, we need to be able to react or respond, trying to make sure I use the correct terminology these days, respond, um, thinking and responding in like with time, the
You got
time
it.
element. And people they'll come to a workshop once, and they don't continue their
Development.
practice, their drills, their education on it. Either they think it's okay, they feel like, okay, I'm confident enough. I don't know what the reason is, if What do you have to say about that? Because that just it's like any other skill, right? I mean, you cannot get better at it unless you practice.
Absolutely. My thoughts, my thoughts are this, and I'm not making any excuses for people, but I understand human behavior. Um, we often operate out of sight, out of mind,
Hmm.
meaning that as long as nothing happening, I don't see myself having to do anything about it. Uh, and that's why we get interesting classes after something has already happened
Mm-hmm.
versus somebody saying, um, for instance, um, my daughter is going away to college, and I realized that she is just clueless as to her safety because as my child, I've pretty much guarded her from situations where she didn't have to really think about it. She just basically depended upon me to protect her.
Mm-hmm.
So before I send her off uh, in the jungle of life in her college years, I think I should need to take her to a class or get her some training to be able to deal with potential problems that she very well may run into as a college student. We don't think like that, unfortunately. Um, but after something has already happened, then there's this awareness
Mm-hmm.
that uh, quickly dies down over a period of time, and then they go back to normal, you know, where other things become important. I my my other thing is that it's a cultural thing. There are many cultures, especially in our past, where martial skills, where in some cultures today, are considered life skills.
Mm-hmm.
There's no separation between the two. Um, it's just part of living and surviving and existing
Mm-hmm.
in their particular environment. And it very well may be in a practical sense, meaning that in some places in Africa where you need to be able to protect yourself to be able to survive, or a matter of tradition or cultural, like Irish stick fighting, for instance, which I understand is having a resurgence as a very traditional cultural thing for them. But generally speaking, a lot of Western cultures, we don't, the more the more comfort and ease we have, the less
Mm-hmm.
we're concerned about it.
Well, what would you say to parents about their children? Because there's this big anti-bullying thing. Um, what do we and there's the whole legal issue is really, when you're dealing in schools with schools, I mean, it can become so
Convoluted.
frustrating if what I don't know, maybe I'm not asking you to give people advice, but do you have any thought
I said, Donna,
legally?
don't put me
Don't go
don't put
there.
me in this direction.
But I mean, I know what I would say, and I know others that will just come out and say things.
Yeah, but still, even with bullying, yes, I think that most of us would agree of there are very simple principles in dealing with bullies. But having said that, a lot is not done in terms of, again, situational awareness, and the escalation skills that kids should have. Many kids find themselves, and I see, I want to be careful with this too because I don't want the victim to to feel like they asked for it. It's not that at all. But
Right.
there's certain situations we can avoid as opposed to yielding to social pressures.
Hmm.
Okay, avoiding certain people as opposed to befriending them.
Right.
Uh, so yeah, yes, it can be
It
complicated.
does get complicated, and just kind of a quick funny story, I think. I was somehow, I don't know, I was on this topic discussing with one of my grandsons the other day. I forget exactly what the whole conversation was, but he said, uh, I think we were talking about being trained something, and he was talking about a time that he was at school and he was at his locker, and I think, oh, I asked him if he had ever been bullied at when he was in school, and there's a thing, and I forget what it's called. They do on kids do on others' lockers to scare them or whatever. So somebody did this. He was at his locker. Somebody they jump up, they smack I don't know what they do. They hit the locker. People probably know. I don't know. And he just automatically responded by turning around and decking the kid. And the funny thing about that is that that was one of his friends. And
Oh
his friend was like, "Yo, man, what did you do that for?"
no,
He's
jeez.
like, "Well, don't mess with me." And he goes, "Nobody ever did it to me again." You
Yes,
know?
it really like I
So,
said, it can be so complicated. But
yeah.
I tell parents, regardless regardless of this school systems regulations and laws and legal whatnots, you teach your kid to follow the rules, but you never are required. You should never be required to give your safety in order to honor certain rules. And what I say by that is this because these scenarios keep coming up over and over again because it's real. I remember my oldest daughter being bullied on a regular basis, and she was bullied for most of her elementary school years.
Mm.
And I found out sitting with her the reason why. First of all, I found out she was being physically. When I say bullied, it was no longer verbal; it was also physical. She was afraid that if she were to protect herself, that she was going to get in trouble with the school, which would get her in trouble with me.
Mm.
So I had to unpackage that and help her process this. And the bottom line, the outcome was you do what you need to do to let people know that somebody's bothering you.
Hmm.
But if there's nobody there and somebody's threatening to harm you, you protect yourself and I'll deal with the school.
Hmm.
Well, the next day, because apparently there was a group of girls, several girls, that were persistently bullying her and physical toward her. And I found this out later.
Mm.
Well, these girls proceeded to do, I guess, what they normally do, but they surrounded her and they were about to hit her. But before they hit her, and this was described to me from one of the teacher's assistants, she when when they demonstrated that they were going to harm her, she took all three of them, boop, 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 and the result or the outcome was is that yes, she was suspended from school a couple of days, but that's okay with me.
Hmm.
And these girls never bothered her again.
Right.
So, every situation is different.
Yeah, it is.
And I don't believe and I think the bottom line is this: you teach your kids to avoid conflict. And even if conflict results, give them the skills to be able to de-escalate. What do you say? What do you do?
Hmm.
Watch your body language. Don't communicate that you mean one thing and you mean something else.
Hmm.
And in every opportunity that you have to get from the situation, you get from it. You leave. You don't have to stand your ground, so to speak, in certain situations. But if you're cornered, you're surrounded, you have no way around it, there's no authorities to be able to rescue you, you do what you have to do.
Right. And your body language tells so much.
Oh, yeah.
They've done studies on that as far as uh, potential attacks, and they actually interviewed the criminals and who said, if somebody is walking very confidently and, they can tell by their body language whether they should attack somebody or not.
Absolutely. That's just simple, basic predatory behavior.
Hmm.
I choose prey or I choose victims based upon my perception of success.
Right.
Somebody that, I have to be able to get what I want from this person with the least risk as possible.
Hmm.
Risk of getting caught, risk of getting hurt. Uh, so that means picking who I perceive as being the weakest and the easiest versus somebody that's the toughest. Now, there's other predatory behavior that's the opposite. It's like one alpha male sees another alpha male, and they've got to decide who's going to be the alpha male. You notice
That,
that is
that enters into the real crazy part of yeah.
or there's one queen bee
Yeah.
that sees another queen bee. you know, it can human behavior is so
And
so
I was thinking as you were saying that, the thought was coming to me too, that when I said before, all these things we have to be thinking about, but the perpetrator, criminal, whatever you want to call them, they're also thinking ahead.
absolutely,
So
absolutely,
we're both kind of, if you're aware, if you're situationally aware and aware of, yeah. So you've got that. It might be a little bit of time, but you got that. You got
yes,
that
yes,
awareness, then you can decide. Thurston,
exactly.
so somebody says, why don't you give us a little bit of your background? Like how do you know all this stuff? What are you doing? You're not just some guy reading a book and deciding to go out and teach this. So give us a little bit of your background.
Yeah, and those guys get on my nerves sometimes too. Um, but yes, I was a police officer for several years. Prior to a police officer, I was a loss prevention officer for retail establishments. After I ended after my law enforcement career ended because of vision issues, I ended up back into security, and I've done several um, type of security assignments, everything from healthcare security as working in an inner city emergency room hospital to armor car security to campus security for a inner city high school. Um, and the list goes on and on. I ended up actually being a dream job of being a manager of security training and development for an international security agency. I also had a uh, life in mental health. I was a mental health recovery specialist and an intensive case manager for several years. And just being a husband for 44 years and a parent of four children and three grandchildren, and also an ordained minister for almost going on maybe 29, almost 30 years now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've
So you have a really well-rounded background, and I love the mental health part of it because so much of that is intertwined. Of course, we're humans. So yeah, so this guy knows what he's talking about, everybody.
a little
And
bit and still learning.
and yes, and that's, I it's so important to keep educating ourselves and keep up with things, and I know you do that. And I know that you are constantly looking at what you teach and how you can improve upon those
Yes,
things that you're teaching and evolving it and going,
yes,
and looking at the times that we are living in. And
exactly.
so yeah, you are very knowledgeable, not just knowledgeable, but you practice what you teach and preach. So,
And
yeah.
it has been quite a educational process for me, especially within the last several years or so, because I'm learning uh, from all these experiences that I've been blessed with, how the Lord's been teaching me and guiding me and instructing me uh, um, how to uh, how to properly apply all of what you know
Mhm.
so that it can be used in the most effective way to help protect people. And everybody does not have the resources that that law enforcement, the military,
Mm.
and and agencies,
Right.
security agencies have to protect themselves.
Hmm.
So we need to be smarter. We need to be smarter, and being smarter is just not getting a gun and call it, you know, all done. No, it takes more than that.
Yeah.
Um, because every situation cannot be resolved by a firearm. As a matter of fact, I will say that the overwhelming majority of situations in which we come in conflict with individuals, where it ends up being a physical conflict, whether it be um, being robbed or some type of sexual assault or some random act of road rage or something like that, the overwhelming majority of them end up being physical. Even if one person does have a firearm,
Hmm.
it still may end up being physical
Hmm.
because a person sometimes, and this is another issue, people buy and carry firearms with no intention of actually using it. Their hope is that the threat of presenting it
Mm.
is enough to cause the potential attacker to back down so they don't have to use it, only to find out that it didn't work.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've known you for a long time now, and I've seen you, when I had a school and you came 2, 3 times a week to work with our kids, and I've seen this whole program and you have a whole philosophy, and you have a program called, you call it Philoso.
Yes.
That I've seen it all evolving and developing throughout these years, and I have not had one person in even in any of our classes that has ever been disappointed with what they have received from your great wealth of knowledge. So we have some classes coming up, and I really hope that people will join us. I hope, I'm still believing that, in fact, you got to keep me updated on the physical conditioning class. Well, go easy on me.
Oh, well.
But I love, my desire too is that I would be in training, more often to learn these things. I think it's so important. So anyway, any closing thoughts?
Um, one thing I didn't mention is is this integration. I talked about the mental and the physical, but I also want to emphasize also the spiritual. Um, there uh, there are some traditional martial arts that do have a spiritual component in them, and with Philosophy, that is a very important part. And I do know that some people prefer and they make their choices as to what systems they want to take advantage of based upon um, their preferences. And some participants choose to just um, deal with the mental and the physical part. And then there are some individuals that want to understand how the spiritual or Christian components factor into integrating all those things. You know, there are options, you know.
Mhm.
So just know that what we do, these principles apply to everybody. Everybody needs to be safe.
Mhm.
Everybody needs to train to prepare for the worst case scenario, the worst case potential scenario. Um, Everybody needs to be conditioned spiritually, mentally, and physically to be able to deal with the crisis that everybody has an appointment with. We all do. The question is how many warnings do we uh, ignore before we take heed?
Mm.
And I think that's the question.
Yeah, that's a good one. Good one. Well, thank you again, as usual. Really interesting topic and great discussion. I appreciate you taking your time to do this, Thurston. And I just want to tell everybody to don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, share. And I will be, when we post this up, we'll link some other videos. And maybe I'll do that de-escalation one so that people can go right to that one after this one. And don't forget to check out our website, worldwideacademytrainingservices.org. It's a new one. So excited. It's all been brand new, cleaned up, and that's where we'll list our classes, our Facebook page, Worldwide Academy Training Services,
It
Instagram.
looks nice.
Yeah. I did not do it. So I'm so excited for people to go there and to, yeah, let your friends know about what we're doing. And we do come out and travel to you. So hope to make a connection with you all soon. And we've got some other interesting topics coming up. I'm not going to tell you yet what they are, but I've got some people in the pipeline that I think are going to be interesting too. So, all right, everybody, thanks for stopping by. We'll see you again.
Thank
Ciao.
you, everybody.